We welcome you to another edition of Economic Forum, where we discuss various issues affecting our economy in Zimbabwe. There may be issues to do with tourism, with manufacturing, with the industry, even with religion, culture, and education. My name is John Masuhu. As the year ends, I want to take a stock of how we've done economically. Where have we scored some successes, and what projects have been commissioned or have you been working on this year that are worth mentioning, because it was quite an eventful year economically. So we've invited an economist, Dr. Prosper Chitambara, to help us look through what we've done during the year. Welcome to Economic Forum.
Thank you so much, Chair, for having me.
Am I right to say it was an eventful year?
Yes, I think you are right to say that it was an eventful year from different perspectives, yes. Both from a macroeconomic perspective and also even from an infrastructural and investment basis or perspectives. When you look at, say, the major infrastructure projects that government has been embarking on, we have the Chirundu Harare Bed Bridge, which is ongoing, and I think it's nearing completion. We've seen a lot of progress on that front. And road infrastructure, I would say transport and logistics infrastructure is critical in terms of sustaining a growth. And as you know, that's a major corridor that's actually linking a number of countries within the region. And it's also in line, obviously, with integration at regional level, at SADC level, and also even at continental level through the African Continental Free Trade Area. So I would say that's a major highlight. Mm-hmm. Then we have also, in terms of energy is also a key enabler. We have seen progress also in terms of the expansion of Hwange 7 and 8. And I'm sure next year, I think we should be probably nearing self-sufficiency in terms of a generation of electricity. But of course, the major point is that we need to be emphasizing renewable energy. And we've also seen a lot of private sector investments by corporates in terms of renewable energy generation in the country. So I would call that also a major highlight. We saw the modernization of the Beit Bridge border post, which is also critical in terms of facilitating trade, intra-country trade, and even intra-regional trade. So I would also call that a major highlight. So those are some of the key. Also maybe dam construction. The government has been making a lot of progress in terms of dam construction. And for me, I think that's a key game changer in terms of unleashing the potential of our agricultural sector, if that is also coupled with investments, of course, continued investments in infrastructure.
Yes. Yeah. Dr. Chitambara, maybe you want to emphasize how we've managed to do these things despite the difficulties that we face, including economic sanctions and so forth.
I think to borrow from the mantra of the president that we've seen a lot of the leveraging of public resources in terms of financing a lot of these infrastructure projects. Of course, we've also seen a bit of investments from the Chinese to try to plug in the huge infrastructure financing gap that's already there. But I think the most important thing is that we are seeing government assuming a greater autonomy and financial responsibility in terms of financing of a lot of these key and mega infrastructure projects, which in my view is very, very sustainable. But of course, going forward, we also need to be crowding in private sector to come on board through public-private partnerships.
In terms of energy, I think you mentioned the Hwange. How about even the oil exploration that is taking place? Are we making any headway there?
I think we are making significant headway in terms of the oil and gas exploration in Mzarabani. I think there are very good prospects from what we are actually hearing. And I think for me that will also be a major game changer for the economy of Zimbabwe going forward.
Dr. Chitambara, I think we've delved deeper into the infrastructure or the mega infrastructure projects that we have in the country, which you highlighted as having happened during the year. But now let's look at the investment.
Yes.
There are a number of investment projects, some of which the President, His Excellency, has actually commissioned.
Yes.
Let's look at some of them, starting with the Manize project.
Yes. So I think that's a major investment project there, because it's valued at about $1 billion, and it's going to make Zimbabwe one of the biggest steel producers actually in the world. And again, that's critical in terms of our reindustrialization drive, and also in terms of creation of employment. When you look at the number of jobs that are projected to be created under this project, it's quite massive. It's probably 10,000 or thereabouts, and that's a lot. So it will contribute to employment creation. It will contribute to the gross domestic product of the economy through steel production, and of course that will have a major upstream and downstream linkages and economies, not just locally, but also regionally and continentally and even globally. Because that will now feed into the regional value chains and even the global value chains as well. So that's the first major investment project that we've seen being commissioned. Then of course we have the that we mentioned earlier on, just briefly, the oil and gas exploration activities in Mzarabani. Again, like you said, it's a very promising project, and it's going to create a lot of opportunities for the economy, and not just for the local economy, but also even for the regional and the continental and global economy at large.
How about the mining sector? Have we seen any projects taking place? Any new investments coming?
Yeah, in mining, a lot has been happening. Expansion even of the existing mining projects. And I think we're in line with the vision of the mining sector. And mining has also benefited in the second half of the year. We've seen the firming up of commodity prices. And obviously that's a boon for the local economy. But of course, earlier on, the Ukraine crisis affected commodity prices, and that also hit us hard. But we've seen now the firming up of global commodity prices, and we're projecting that trend, that upward trend, to continue even in the new year. So mining remains a key sector for the Zimbabwean economy at present and even going forward. But of course, we need to be locking in value and ensure that at least a lot of the value addition, the industrialization that is associated with mining happens actually locally on the ground. Mm-hmm. That we hope to lock in value and to create more opportunities for the economy.
That's Dr. Prosper Chitambara, an economist who is our guest today on Economic Forum, where we are taking stock of what has happened within our economic sector in 2022. He has talked about the mega investments as well as the mega infrastructure. So we'll continue with 2022 in retrospect as far as the economy is concerned in our second segment. We are now in the second segment of Economic Forum, where today we are looking at 2022, the year in retrospect, as far as economic development is concerned in Zimbabwe. We've looked at various highlights that took place during the year as far as our economic growth is concerned, and our guest here, Dr. Prosper Chitambara, did outline some of those issues and how they will benefit Zimbabwe. Some of them are actually ongoing projects, but this year there was a lot of progress in terms of going forward. But Dr. Chitambara, let's look at the growth trajectory as far as the year is concerned. What affected it? I'm sure there are various factors that you would want to explain that affected our growth, where we grew and where we did not.
So look, last year our economy actually grew by 7.8%. This year there's a slowdown. The projected growth officially is about 4.6%. That's government projection. Then the International Monetary Fund is projecting 3.5%, while the World Bank is projecting 3.7%. But the key factors behind that are, number one, when you look at our agricultural performance for this year, it was way below our expectations. We normally say that when agriculture sneezes, the rest of the economy actually catches a cold. So below normal agriculture production affected our growth projection for this year, or our macroeconomic or growth performance for this year. So that's the first factor.
Maybe on agriculture, you want to mention why it declined when there is so much support that comes from government. Is it because of climate change? Is it because of the rains and so forth? You want to explain
I think it's really the variability in the rainfall patterns because of what some people call climate change. So that has really hit us hard. I think that's why now there is talk of climate proofing our agricultural sector through massive investments in dam construction, what government is doing, but also through irrigation, strengthening irrigation capacity and infrastructure. For me, that would be the game changer. If we're able to get those two right, and of course also the infrastructure to support the movement of agricultural commodities and inputs, that will also be critical. So we need to be emphasizing in terms of our agricultural subsidy program, we need to be emphasizing the issue of infrastructure around irrigation, dam construction, which is currently ongoing, and also the general supporting infrastructure, for example, the road infrastructure, and also energy. And of course, we also know government will be unveiling the massive rural electrification project that should also help to underpin the recovery of the agricultural sector going forward. So that's the first factor that affected our growth. Then obviously we were also affected by negative externalities from the Ukraine-Russia crisis. We saw a massive increase in the price of fuel, for example.
Maybe you can contextualize, when you're talking about such a faraway country or faraway countries like Russia and Ukraine and how they affect us. Let's just get an understanding of how we get affected.
As you know, Russia and even Ukraine, they are the very big producers of oil and gas, and also even of wheat. And Zimbabwe, we actually rely on these countries for some of our wheat supplies and our energy requirements. So obviously the crisis had an adverse effect in terms of the pricing of commodities. And Zimbabwe, obviously, we are import dependent in terms of fuel, for example, and also in terms of wheat. It didn't just affect Zimbabwe, it affected the rest of the globe. And currently, most economies are also experiencing rising inflationary pressures. So I think that's a major challenge. And of course, we've seen central banks across the world responding by increasing interest rates, which again increases the cost of financing economic recovery. So the Ukraine-Russia crisis also affected us. Of course, like we're saying, it didn't just affect Zimbabwe, but it also affected the rest of the globe.
I'm sure there are lessons learned from that war in that we should not be over-dependent.
Exactly.
For example, we're an agricultural country yet we depend on Ukraine for our wheat and so forth. So some of the projects that you were mentioning
they'll really come in handy. So it really that's a major lesson that we've learned, and also even learned from the COVID-19 pandemic, that we need to be self-sufficient, especially in terms of food. No country the world over is successfully developed without first assuring and ensuring food autonomy and food security. So I think what government is doing needs to be upscaled, so at least in the next few years we can then begin to benefit.
We cannot talk about 2022 without mentioning the introduction of the gold coins, as well as a number of statements that the central bank as well as the Ministry of Finance actually issued in order to make sure that we control our inflation. Maybe just to wind up our second segment on that.
Yeah, I think this year has been a bit difficult in terms of issues to do with the chronic inflation. We have been experiencing chronic inflation, but of course we are thankful to God that the reforms that government has unveiled is the key main reforms, or maybe rather three. The first one, we've seen reforms in terms of enhancing the efficiency of public spending through value for money reforms. I think that's been that's critical, because we were also beginning to notice a lot of indiscipline, especially around issues to do with government procurement in general. And obviously that was also driving the chronic high inflationary trend. So government has done well in that respect. But of course, there's need to sustain that and to cover other sectors across the economy, because there are still a lot of leakages within our economy that will need to be plugged in if we are to enhance the efficiency of our public spending. Then, of course, the introduction of the gold coins, like you highlighted, there's also been positive because it has mopped up excess liquidity within the economy, which has also had a stabilizing effect in terms of our chronic high inflation. So we're actually seeing now that both our annual and our monthly inflation numbers have actually been trending downwards. So there has been actually a slowdown. But it's still not enough. We need to sustain that, because that will be very critical in terms of enhancing local and even external competitiveness. Because when you compare Zimbabwe and other countries in the region, we are still not where we should be in terms of competitiveness. And these reforms will be very critical in terms of the restoration of that competitiveness. Then, of course, reforms around the auction system, enhancing its effectiveness and efficiency, they've also had some stabilizing effect on the economy. So I would say those three factors have been critical in terms of this slowdown in inflation that we've been experiencing over the past few months.
Dr. Prosper Chitambara explaining how we've done with regards to the reforms as well as the growth trajectory that we've had in Zimbabwe, talking about the auction system, the gold coins. But when we come back in the third and final segment, Dr. Chitambara will also be looking at the economic outlook, that all hope is not lost. So where do we go from here? Join us in the third and final segment of Economic Forum. We are now in the third and final segment of Economic Forum, where today we are having a year in retrospect, the year 2022, as far as economic development is concerned. We've looked at some of the mega infrastructure and mega investments that we've had. We have highlighted some of the projects that have come into the country, most of them commissioned by His Excellency the President. And we have looked at other things like the gold coins and the auction system as to how they've helped us in our economic growth. We have Dr. Prosper Chitambara here, who is helping us on that. And this time around, you are looking at the economic outlook for the year 2023. Where do we go from here?
Yeah, I think I would say our challenge going forward is to sustain the reform agenda, that especially macroeconomic reform agenda that's being implemented by government. So we need obviously to continue with the reforms, especially around enhancing public spending, the efficiency of public spending.
Discipline.
Discipline, fiscal discipline, monetary discipline, because ultimately I would say stability or lack of it is a function of discipline. So the issue of discipline, I think for me, is very, very critical. Financial discipline in general. For me, that would be the most critical success factor in terms of our ability to be able to sustain this modicum of stability that we've been witnessing in the past few months.
As we institute these reforms, are there any risks that we should actually be aware of and avoid so that we go forward and we don't become a laughingstock?
I think the risks are always there, especially around the issue of spending. But the risk is always that you want to probably overspend and spend more than you're actually earning. And I say this because next year also we are going for general elections. And the world over, general elections are normally associated with a bit of instability, especially around how the elections, number one, are financed, and also even other expenditures that are related to general elections. Because parastatals, for me, will be critical because they provide, most of our parastatals actually provide critical public goods. And if we are able to enhance their efficiency, their performance, I think that will go a long way in terms of enhancing development within the economy.
The other thing that we've been involved in is regional, interventions. We've had a lot of meetings, and also in the month of November, you'll recall that there was a visit by the Commonwealth Group for us to re-enter the Commonwealth. What opportunities do we see in all these re-engagements and some of the other fora where His Excellency has been going to say we are open for business?
I think they present significant opportunities for our economy. You mentioned our re-engagement and the possibility that we could be readmitted back into the Commonwealth. As you know, the Commonwealth is a big market, so obviously that exposes our products to a much bigger market. But of course, for us as an economy to benefit from some of these opportunities, it comes back to the issue of enhancing the competitiveness of our products. Because ultimately, we are competing with products from other countries where, in terms of competitiveness, they are doing much better than us. So I think the challenge for us is to ensure that we address issues of productivity, address issues of competitiveness. And of course, a lot of that will be addressed through these mega infrastructure projects that government has been undertaking. But of course, we need to even go beyond that to ensure that at least our products can compete with products from China. Our products can compete with products from Zambia or even South Africa. Because when you are regionally integrated, when you are part of a global market or a continental market, how you are able to leverage maximum and optimal benefits from that is by ensuring that the competitiveness of your local economy is actually very, very high.
Dr. Prosper Chitambara, our guest today, an economist who has been helping us to look at the year 2022 in retrospect. How have we done economically? What projects have come into the country? We saw that we commissioned quite a number of projects, and also there was a lot of regional and international re-engagement where His Excellency, the President, has continued with this mantra, Zimbabwe is open for business. We looked at the mega investments as well as the mega infrastructural development that has taken place in Zimbabwe. So that's it for today. If you'd like to get in touch with us, you can do so on the numbers that are showing on your screen. If you'd like to engage with us on Economic Forum, you can do so again on the social media platforms that you are seeing on your screen. If you have missed some of the episodes of Economic Forum, you can follow them and view them on Economic Forum Zimbabwe on our YouTube channel. So on behalf of Dr. Prosper Chitambara and the production crew, I wish you a happy festive season. This is John Masu.